Good morning, everybody. How are you? My name is Juan Carlos Bermudez. I'm the mayor of the city of Doral. I want to welcome you here to the city of Doral, and it's a extra special day for me, obviously, to have some wonderful guests amongst the lawyers that I'll introduce in a second, friends from a long time, the ambassador, and obviously the doctors that are here. Buenos días, mi nombre es Juan Carlos Bermúdez, el alcalde de la ciudad de Doral. Bienvenido aquí a nuestra ciudad, si están visitando por la primera vez. Es un honor estar aquí en este evento y darle gracias, ver tantos amigos de hace tanto tiempo y también al embajador, a los abogados que están trabajando en este caso, los doctores, las doctoras, y también reconocer los oficiales que están aquí con nosotros hoy. Quiero decir una cosa muy importante. Este es un grupo, y este caso en particular para mí es algo especial porque es un grupo con mucho coraje. Y nosotros que hemos crecido en una democracia entendemos lo que es el derecho y lo que es un privilegio, y es un gran derecho, proteger los derechos de un ser humano es lo más importante que uno puede hacer. I want to recognize this courageous group that's here with us today, and particularly the doctors who are standing up for their rights and the rights of thousands of Cuban doctors around the world, which, as all of you know, is a long story of denying the many rights that have been denied to Cubans over the last 60 years. Y quiero decir, doctora, que obviamente ustedes están trabajando para los derechos no solamente de ustedes, pero tantos médicos que han trabajado por todo el mundo en estos 60 años que el gobierno cubano le ha negado los derechos individuales a los individuos. I just want to, before I introduce the leaders of this more important the more important individuals in the room than me. It's an honor to have you here, but they certainly are the ones that are carrying this battle forward. But I want to tell you a little bit about why this is so important to me personally. I came at the age of 3. I have a little green card that says political refugee. Still have it. I remind all my good friends, whether they're Cubans, Venezuelans, Bolivians, Ecuadorians, wherever they be, that I am a political refugee, technically still. So even though I'm a U.S. citizen, have been for a long time. The most important thing for those of us who have worked so hard, and when we started, we were, most of us grew up here, but we're very young, but we're committed to the cause of democracy across the world and democracy in Cuba. I had the opportunity back in the mid-1990s to attempt to fly into Cuba to represent an Amnesty International prisoner of conscience, Francisco Chaviano, which I'm sure some of you may know. The Cuban government denied us the entry. It was the first and maybe the only time that Cuban-American lawyers have tried to fly into Cuba to represent a Amnesty International prisoner of conscience. So our commitment to the cause of democracy, not only in Cuba but across this hemisphere, is very important. And today is a very important day for me personally, and I want to thank the people that put this event together for thinking of giving us the opportunity to have the event here. Because on a personal level, it's an important issue to me. And I hope that soon we'll all be able to have an event like this in a free, sovereign, and democratic Cuba. Para mí, los que me conocen hace mucho tiempo, cuando éramos más jóvenes y teníamos más pelo, hace muchos años, cuando un abogado joven, traté de entrar en aquellos tiempos, en los 90, a representar a Francisco Chaviano, que era prisionero de conciencia de Amnistía Internacional. Hoy en día todavía creo que es la única vez que abogados americanos o cubano-americanos han tratado de entrar a Cuba a representar a un prisionero de conciencia. Para mí, entre todas las cosas que he hecho en ejerciendo el derecho en los Estados Unidos como abogado, no como alcalde solamente, es uno de los honores más grandes que he tenido, porque aunque el gobierno cubano me negó la entrada entonces, me la sigue negando, sigo insistiendo que todos queremos una Cuba verdaderamente soberana, una Cuba verdaderamente democrática. Y la soberanía no empieza, como he dicho muchas veces, con los gobiernos, empieza con los individuos. Si los individuos no son soberanos, el país no puede ser soberano. In any case, like I said, it's a great honor, and I'm now going to go ahead and introduce the gentleman who's going to be the leader of what is this important process, this important human rights process. And when I say it's important, I mean not just for us as Cuban Americans, not just for us, whether you're Venezuelan or from another country, but for all individuals across the world. And it takes courage. I'm a lawyer by trade, mayor, I guess, by election. I don't have a choice. But the most important thing is, as a lawyer, I can tell you that lawyers have been at the forefront of protecting individual rights across the world. And I have great admiration for individuals who give of their time and of their effort to protect the individual rights. And I can tell you this, that a country that doesn't have the independent practice of law, and Cuba does not, is not a country where you want to live in. It's not a country that protects the rights of its citizens. So let me introduce Samuel Dubbin, who I'm very honored to have here today. He's going to be the lead attorney for this project. And Sam, come on up.
Thank you very much, Mayor Bermudez, and thank you for your kind remarks and for hosting this very important press conference. I want to start, I'm Sam Dubbin, the lead plaintiff's counsel in the Cuban doctors' human rights litigation against the Pan American Health Organization. I'd like to introduce co-counsel in the case, Jonathan Cuneo and Peter Gil-Magnon. They're with the Cuneo, Gilbert, and LaDuca law firm in Washington, D.C., and our two firms represented the Hungarian Holocaust survivors in a similar human rights lawsuit over property that was looted from the Hungarian Jews in the Southern District of Florida, is where we litigated that case to a successful conclusion. So I'm honored to be joined again by John Cuneo and his colleague Peter in order to pursue this very important litigation. On behalf of our clients, who you're going to be very honored and amazed to hear from in a moment. I only speak English. They only speak Spanish. So I want to ask people now, after they speak, will anybody need their comments to be translated? Okay, so we're fine with that. So they're going to be next, and then I'm going to introduce Ambassador Otto Reich, who's well known to everybody in this room, whose experience in the field of human rights, international affairs, the totalitarian regime in Cuba that the United States has been unable to change all these years is paramount, and he's going to have a lot to say about this lawsuit. But this is why I'm taking on this case. As the mayor said, Cuba's abuse of its citizens in numerous ways, including the overseas missions which they use to generate foreign currency, is a well-known problem. It's been documented for decades. What's new here is that there is an international organization that's affiliated with the United Nations, the Pan American Health Organization, which most people would assume does good things and does the right thing. But here it has been the principal force in order to enable Cuba to export their citizens to be slave laborers in a foreign country where they don't have a choice to go. They're treated like chattel. They're totally surveilled and supervised by Cuban intelligence agents in Brazil who work for PAHO. And then, lo and behold, of every dollar that Brazil pays for their services, PAHO, the Pan American Health Organization, sends 85% of that money back to Cuba. The doctors get less than 10%, and the Pan American Health Organization itself keeps 5% of that money from Brazil as a fee for profit. So what's different here is that we have an international organization located right here in Washington, D.C., a recipient of U.S. taxpayer dollars, and it is aiding and abetting and, in fact, engineering an entire scheme when we have the written contracts that document how the Pan American Health Organization, Cuba, a private corporation operating under Cuban law, meticulously orchestrated this scheme to make it look like an academic program when in fact they were violating Brazilian law by bringing in doctors from overseas and laundering the money through the Pan American Health Organization so Cuba could get dollars. So here we have, and what the Pan American Health Organization was doing is a clear violation of U.S. federal law, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. So PAHO conducted intentionally a criminal enterprise from which it profited. And that's what's different. And I'm so honored to be representing these very important figures from Cuba who have had the courage to not only defect, but to speak out about the horrific conditions that they were forced to operate in Brazil. And the legal system does provide a remedy, and that's what's different about this case. And international law also outlaws the kinds of human trafficking that PAHO was engineering in this case. So we have federal law, federal court jurisdiction, we have plaintiffs who live in the United States, and an organization located in Washington, D.C., who has been profiting from human trafficking, and that's why we've gone to the legal system in order to get PAHO to be accountable and to secure compensation to Dr. Matos and Dr. Caballo for the damages that they suffered. So next I'm going to introduce Dr. Ramona Matos, a true hero of the Cuban people, and particularly the doctors who have been suffering the way she and over 10,000 other Cuban doctors and medical professionals who've been mistreated, subjected to trafficking in Brazil. She's going to tell her story, and I'm very honored to introduce Dr. Ramona Matos.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Ramona Matos, yo soy médico especialista en medicina general integral. En el año 86 me gradué de médico, ya han pasado varios años. Estuve en la misión de Bolivia en el año 2008 y en la misión de Brasil, más médico, en el año 2014. Bueno, 13 para 14. Nosotros nos enteramos de la misión Más Médico allá en Cuba y decidimos ir a esa misión. Era una misión humanitaria, supuestamente humanitaria. Siempre preguntábamos cuánto era que nos iban a pagar y nunca nos lo dijeron hasta un día antes de irnos para Brasil. En esa ocasión nos iban a dar $1,000, de cuyos $1,000, $400 nos lo iban a dar al cambio en Brasil y $600 iban para una cuenta nuestra en el banco en Cuba, que no podíamos disponer de ella hasta que no regresáramos de la misión. Estando en el Brasil me di cuenta que el Más Médico no era solo para los médicos cubanos, que en el Más Médico estaban también incluidos otros médicos de otros países. Había una diferencia total entre los médicos de otros países y los médicos cubanos. Los médicos cubanos éramos controlados por un asesor de la OPAS, que en este caso sería PAHO, porque OPAS es en brasileño, PAHO. Él no nos dejaba salir del lugar, no podíamos visitar ni Brasilia ni nada, teníamos que estar allí. Todos los demás salían a visitar Brasil, etcétera. A nosotros no nos dejaron visitar nada durante esos 3 meses que estuvimos en la preparatoria. Yo me tomé porque me gusta mucho investigar, empecé a hablar con los médicos, tanto de Venezuela, eran de muchísimos países, de Portugal, de España, de donde quiera. Entonces ellos nos decían que les iban a pagar $10,000, $20,000 o $30,000, dependiendo del lugar donde lo fueran a colocar. En el caso mío, a mí me mandaron para el Amazonas, en un lugar llamado Pará, Pacajá. Y $10,000 en ese entonces al cambio serían unos $5,000. Entonces yo empecé a investigar y dije, bueno, me van a dar 1,000, de ellos 400, de ahí 600. Yo vi que había algo escondido, había algo raro y decidí denunciarlo en el Congreso del Brasil, de la presidencia del Brasil. De ese momento hubo un antes y un después, es decir, que se dice que la doctora Ramona marcó un antes y un después de la misión Brasil, porque de ahí en adelante ellos hicieron un aumento de salario que tampoco era lo que debían de dar, ya después se sabrá qué cosa era, y le aumentaron el salario a los médicos cubanos en Cuba y se lo aumentaron un poquito también en otras misiones. Nosotros teníamos limitado nuestra libertad. Nosotros éramos controlados, nosotros no nos podíamos relacionar con los nacionales, como se les dice ellos. Luego eso como que cambió un poquito, hubo luego casamiento, pero hasta el momento donde yo estuve allí, todo era controlado por un agente o una persona de la OPA al cual, por ejemplo, yo una vez quería salir a comprar cigarros porque yo fumo y comprar pan y me dijeron que yo no podía salir a las 6 de la tarde. Le dije, pero ¿por qué? Si ahí mismo está, en la esquina está la bodega, yo quiero comprar cigarros, y me dijeron que no, que para yo salir de la casa habían esas médicos cubanas, vivían ahí conmigo, tenían que comunicarle al asesor de la OPA que yo iba a salir de la casa a comprar cigarros. Eso me puso bien molesta a mí, porque a mí me gusta ser libre y disfrutar de mi libertad. Entonces, por todo eso fue que yo hice toda esa denuncia a los derechos humanos, porque nos están violando nuestros derechos humanos a donde quiera que vamos. Somos un instrumento monetario. Un instrumento monetario para que el gobierno llene sus arcas de dinero y nosotros sigamos siendo esclavos de ellos. Por eso mismo podemos ver cómo ellos movieron a sus médicos cubanos del Brasil, del maíz médico, nada más sabiendo que Bolsonaro iba a ofrecerle, pagarle todo su salario íntegro, que ellos pudieran ejercer en el Brasil y revalidar su título. Y ellos, ¿qué hicieron? Ellos inmediatamente lo sacaron de allí. Entonces no es una misión humanitaria. Ahí se puede ver cuál es el objetivo de ellos, que somos una moneda de cambio. Ya. Perfecto.
Muchas gracias. The second named plaintiff, Cuban doctor, who we have with us today, was spent almost 3 years in Brazil as a forced laborer. But she's here to tell her story, and we welcome Tatiana Carballo. Dr. Tatiana Carballo.
Por favor, dile ahora.
Ella va a hablar en español. Is anybody need a translation to English?
Muy bien.
Muy bien, gracias.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Tatiana Carballo, tengo 49 años, hace 25 años soy médico cubana, fui graduada en el año 94 como médico general, hice MGI o Medicina General Integral y después hice la especialidad en emergencia, cuidados intensivos. Yo estuve en varios países de misión y estando en Venezuela por segunda vez me contacta el coordinador que hacía falta médicos para misión Maíz Médicos de Brasil. Inmediatamente nos trasladaron de Venezuela para Brasil y pasamos el curso de portugués, etcétera, y fuimos para Brasil, para el estado de Sao Paulo, fue el acogimiento. Inicialmente el contrato ya no era igual que el de la doctora Ramona. Como bien dijo la doctora Ramona, fue un antes y un después. Cuando la doctora Ramona estaba, pagaban $1,000, a ella le daban 400 en Brasil y 600 en una cuenta congelada en Cuba que no le pagaban a menos que regresara de misión y no desertara, como nos llaman, o escapara de la misión. En mi caso fue diferente, o sea, ya en ese entonces estaban pagando los $1,000 a nosotros en el país, o sea, en Brasil, con independencia de el valor del dólar. O sea, inicialmente ganábamos un salario y después bajó el salario porque subió el dólar. No obstante, el gobierno brasileño subió el salario de los médicos que estaban en el programa Maíz Médico, que venían de muchos países suramericanos y a Cuba también. Solo que Cuba recibió ese aumento salarial y no nos aumentó a nosotros lo que debía habernos aumentado, porque todos los médicos estaban ganando $1,500 más. En fin, eso fue inicialmente el primer engaño. Y lo segundo fue que Brasil nos acogió con mucho cariño inicialmente. Otra gente llegando al aeropuerto nos decían esclavos, esclavos, esclavos. Y yo decía, ¿por qué esclavos? O sea, no entendía por qué esclavos. Yo venía de Cuba, no tenía la menor idea por qué éramos esclavos. Después, como bien dice Ramona, me di cuenta por qué nos decían esclavos. No voy a explicar todo lo demás porque ya la doctora Ramona fue bastante explícita. En mi caso particular quiero solo contarles una cosa bien delicada. Por eso es que yo estoy aquí en este minuto, y es que Brasil nos dio la posibilidad en el año 2014 de poder llevar a la familia. Familia era madre, esposo, esposa e hijos, menores o mayores de edad. En mi caso tengo 2 hijos y mi hijo menor, yo le hice todos los trámites, Brasil me le dio una visa por 3 años y mi hijo fue para Brasil conmigo en el año 2015. Por 3 años, supuestamente era por 3 años, pero el gobierno brasileño, el gobierno cubano me obligó literalmente, antes de embarcar en el avión, el primer año de vacaciones, a firmar una extensión de contrato que decía, si usted tiene a su hijo por más de 3 meses en Brasil, usted será revocada con todos los beneficios de su trabajo incautado. O sea, si yo tenía a mi hijo por más de 3 meses en Brasil, además, por encima de la visa que le dio un país, a mi hijo no podía tenerlo, tenía que pagar el pasaje a mi hijo, que es bien caro, cada 3 meses a Cuba, porque el gobierno cubano no quería que mi hijo estuviera conmigo de 3 años, un niño menor de edad, con millones de problemas que al final, bueno, en algún momento se podría decir. Entonces, empezó la cacería de brujas, le decía yo, porque era constantemente en mi casa, el Partido Comunista de Cuba, los miembros del núcleo del partido no me dejaban vivir permanentemente. Tu hijo ya se fue, sacaste el pasaje, ¿cuándo entró? ¿Cuándo entra? ¿Por qué no está? ¿Y por qué está? Y fue un asedio constante, hasta que yo decidí abandonar la misión y pedir asilo. O sea, me acogí al Cuban Medical Parole, a la parole de médicos cubanos, que en ese momento estaba todavía vigente antes de que expresidente Obama, la derogara en el día 12 de enero del año 2017. Sí. Bueno, ya llegué a este país y al mes y medio de estar en este país, mi familia fue desalojada literalmente, como la policía, ambulancia, el Ministerio de Salud Pública, apoyada por la PNR, y mi hija y mi mamá fueron puestas en la calle, y en una casa que yo había hecho con mis medios, con mi dinero de otras misiones, que me habían prometido vender a precio módico cuando regresara a mi país, y le dijeron a mi hija que eso había caducado, porque yo había traicionado la patria. Y yo del sector y no tenía derecho a nada de eso. En fin, se quedó todo eso, todas mis pertenencias, todo lo que yo hice, todo lo que construí con mi dinero, con mi esfuerzo, y tuvimos que mudarnos de La Habana para Matanzas y buscar un alquiler donde vive actualmente mi familia, porque sencillamente Cuba decidió que ya yo no era más cubana. O sea, yo soy ex cubana y estoy condenada a 8 años de exilio forzado por decidir ser libre. Y bueno, como yo soy libre, estoy diciendo esto aquí, y lo voy a decir, lo voy a repetir cuantas veces sea necesario. Y en Brasil intenté empezar a decirlo, y ya fui captada por el ejército cubano, la seguridad cubana, fui captada, y ahí era el conejito, el patico feo de la brigada. Y ya me estaban amenazando que me iban a mandar para Cuba, en fin, por eso tomé la decisión de pedir acogerme al Cuban Medical Parole. Entonces hasta ahí es mi historia. Yo estoy aquí porque quisiera que no pasara esto que pasó con nosotros y continúa sucediendo con todos los médicos que están en Brasil, porque como ustedes bien saben, o todos deben saber, Cuba, cuando Bolsonaro dijo se acabó, no hay más dinero para el régimen cubano y tenemos estas condiciones, y yo pienso que el que paga es el que pone las condiciones, y tú lo aceptas o no lo aceptas, y Cuba decidió pues no aceptarlo y decir que era una vergüenza que Bolsonaro forzara a los médicos a hacer una reválida, y cosa que es algo bien sin pies ni cabeza, porque es otro idioma, hay que revalidar en todos los países donde tú quieres trabajar, que reciba el 100% de su salario, muy justo, porque trabajamos mucho, y que tengan su familia consigo derechos de los humanos, de todos los seres humanos. Y Cuba dijo que no. Entonces, ¿dónde está la humanidad? ¿Dónde está la misión humanitaria a la que yo fui? No la encontré. El sentido humanitario para mí se perdió. Y bueno, otras cosas que en otro momento podría hablar de política y de cosas que no... Mi demanda no es política, mi demanda es por mí, por mi libertad y por el bienestar de mi familia, y que no esté en riesgo más ninguna familia como ha estado la mía, ni sufra todos los maltratos y los atropellos que la mía sufrió en Cuba. Una niña y una señora, mi mamá que es una señora mayor.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much. Your stories are very gripping, and I'm sure that the people here, are shocked and alarmed to hear what's been going on under the auspices of a United Nations affiliated organization, and that's why we're going to take them to court, and why we filed the lawsuit this morning. I'm going to next introduce Otto Reich, who's a former Assistant Secretary of State for Latin America and U.S. Ambassador to Venezuela. Ambassador Reich.
I'm going to speak in English. Puedo hablar en español también, pero para la comunidad bilingüe creo que es hora de... ¿Perdón? Los dos. Okay. Okay. I'm going to be very brief because I think the important message here comes from the very courageous ladies who have exposed what is an international crime, a crime that has been taking place right under the noses of the entire world for decades. For decades, a military regime in Cuba has rented out for its financial benefit the professionals that had the bad fortune of being born in Cuba, being educated in Cuba, and they were rented out as virtual slaves, not to their own financial benefits, but for the benefit of the people who run the regime in Cuba, a very small cadre of Communist Party and military officials. They're the ones, as we heard today, who make between 80 and 90% of what foreign governments have been paying the government of Cuba for the use of this chattel. This is merchandise that the government of Cuba is exporting and that is treated as slaves. Why? They don't receive the benefit of their labor. They're under constant surveillance from the Cuban security services that accompany them to other countries with the acceptance of those other countries. I mean, we should ask the governments that are hosting Cuban doctors and other professionals today, how is it that they allow Secret Service, the equivalent of the Gestapo, to accompany the Cuban doctors to Brazil or Bolivia or the dozens of countries around the world, and to enforce the kind of draconian laws that exist inside Cuba? We should also ask how it's possible for an organization like the Pan American Health Organization, which receives 50% of its budget from the American taxpayer, to be an accomplice in this kind of human trafficking, and to agree with the conditions established by the government of Cuba for its merchandise. We heard what happened to doctors when they protest their living conditions, or the fact that they're not allowed to travel with their family, or if they are allowed to travel, can everybody please turn off their phones? Just turn them off, silence them, thank you. If they travel with a member of the family, which is very unusual, they have conditions like the one that we just heard, that the son of a particular doctor is forced to go back to Cuba, and what the doctor didn't mention is at the doctor's expense. They not only don't receive the vast majority of the money that the foreign government is paying Cuba, but they're forced to pay a lot of their own expenses. By the way, the government of Cuba receives more money from this human trafficking, from this program, than it does from tourism, remittances from the Cuban community outside of Cuba, and mining combined. It's estimated between 11 and 12 billion dollars. It is a major money-making operation for the government, and the beneficiaries are not the people of Cuba. That's what the Cuban government propaganda machine likes to say, and it is amazing that even people who should know better, like former President Obama and former Secretary of State Kerry, praised the Cuban medical program as an example of Cuba's contribution to humanitarian programs around the world. We heard this is not humanitarian. If it were humanitarian, why did Raul Castro, just in the last few days, cancel the program in Brazil when the president-elect of Brazil said that the doctors could stay in Brazil, but only if they were to receive the salaries, and if they received the permission to work in Brazil under the same conditions that Brazilian doctors work. Castro's response was to immediately pull the Cuban doctors out, because it is not a humanitarian program. It is a money-making program. It is virtual slavery. It has to stop, and any international organization that is complicit in this human trafficking must be held to account. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I think they may have expected it in Spanish, too.
Okay, fine. Okay. Va a ver, ¿qué fue lo que dije?
I hope that doesn't mean you didn't understand a thing.
Ok, voy a tratar de resumir. El programa de exportación de médicos del gobierno de Cuba se ve en muchas partes del mundo como un programa humanitario. No lo es. Y lo que hemos oído hoy y lo que han dicho otros médicos que también se han escapado, porque es lo que han tenido que hacer, escapado de este programa, es que este no es un programa humanitario, sino un programa comercial. Los médicos cubanos y otros profesionales cubanos están siendo alquilados por el gobierno de Cuba a cierto precio, y esos médicos reciben entre 10 y 20% del dinero que paga el país que los recibe. Esos médicos no son libres, ellos son esclavos virtuales. ¿Por qué? No solo porque no reciben el dinero que se merece por su trabajo, pero porque siempre están vigilados por la policía secreta de Cuba, que los acompaña, por el equivalente de la Gestapo cubana, porque las condiciones bajo las cuales trabajan, como hemos oído hoy, no les permiten ni siquiera que salgan por su propia cuenta a comprar pan o a comprar cigarrillos, porque no les permiten tener relaciones con los ciudadanos del país local, a menos que sea como parte de su trabajo. Y otra cosa que ayer, cuando nos reunimos algunos de nosotros con estas muy valerosas doctoras, nos dijeron es que también a los médicos los obliga el gobierno de Cuba a hacer propaganda política a favor del gobierno local. O sea, cuando ellos tratan a un paciente, le tienen que decir que ellos están ahí porque el gobierno de Cuba está de acuerdo, por ejemplo, con el gobierno de Dilma Rousseff en Brasil, o con el gobierno de Evo Morales en Bolivia, o con el gobierno de turno, donde quiera que sea, pero ese gobierno de turno es un gobierno que está trabajando y beneficiándose de este tráfico humano, porque eso es lo que este programa es, un tráfico humano. Y para concluir, yo creo que la Organización Panamericana de la Salud, basada en Washington y que recibe el 50% de su presupuesto de los contribuyentes americanos, como yo, tiene que contestar por qué ha sido cómplice de una dictadura militar que usa al ser humano como mercancía y que la está alquilando y beneficiándose de su trabajo. Gracias.
Thank you, Ambassador. The doctors will be available in the coming days to speak individually with any of the media who wish to. I would like to answer questions that you have about the lawsuit, because I've heard many, and I know that there are questions that you probably have. So let's start with sir.
Yeah, hi. Ivan Taylor from Univision 23. My question is, so the lawsuit is against the Pan American Health Organization?
Period, yes.
And why?
Because it's located in the United States. It used its offices in the United States to supervise the Mais Médicos program. It collected money in the United States, which it deposited in its Washington, D.C. bank accounts and then distributed to Cuba, and then kept 5% of that, over $75 million for itself. So it's located here. It's certainly subject to U.S. law, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, which defines everything that you've heard today as forced labor and human trafficking. It's a crime under American law, and the law provides civil remedies for victims, like Dr. Matos and Dr. Carballo and the other plaintiffs in the case. That's why we sued the Pan American Health Organization, because they engineered it, they collected the money, they're here in the United States, they're subject to the laws, and the doctors want to be paid what they're entitled to.
And is a lawsuit on behalf of a number of doctors?
Yes, there are 4 named plaintiffs in the case, in addition to Drs. Carballo and Matos. We also have 2 in Houston who have joined the lawsuit. But it's filed as a class action suit. So, assuming the court certifies it as a class action, which has certain legal requirements, meaning that it satisfies the federal rules that allow individuals to aggregate their claims, because otherwise for the individual claimants it will be difficult to get relief, difficult to hire a lawyer, so the law allows aggregation of claims in a class action. If we're successful getting that certified before the court, and we think we have very solid grounds to do that, then all the Cuban doctors who are now in the United States would be members of the class, and they would get notice of what's happening in the lawsuit. And then they could decide for themselves if they wanted to be a part of it.
Do you have an estimate of the amount of claiming?
Well, you can do the math, which is that $1.5 billion was taken in by PAHO from Brazil. The doctors only got about $125 million of that. Now, not all of the doctors are covered by the suit because many of them are still in Brazil, but there are 3,500 of the Cuban Mais Médicos doctors are here in the United States. So some work for a year, some work for 3 years, so we can't calculate the exact amount of money, but you can get an idea of the order of magnitude that we're talking about. It would be several $100 million that the class members in the U.S. would be entitled to recover. Yes, ma'am.
Can you say when did you file the lawsuit?
This morning, November 30th.
And if I may just ask Dr. Ramona, just a quick clarification, because Ramona, perdón, no era para el nuevo problema de mujer. Disculpe, si usted puede decir, usted menciona un agente de la OPS que controlaba en Brasil. ¿Esa persona era cubana o era brasileña?
What's the question?
Whether the OPS controlling agent was Cuban
or Brazilian. If the person that he mentioned that controls the Cubans in Brazil.
The agent.
Era el agente, generalmente tú no lo conocías. ¿Entiendes? Tú no lo conocías.
Basically, the person wasn't known to you.
Decían que pudiera ser médico, pero tú no sabías si era médico
They claimed
o no era
the person
médico.
could be a doctor.
¿Quién era?
You were unaware of
La
that.
pregunta de ella es si era cubano o cubano.
Cubano. Bueno, cubano.
Was
Ah, era una persona
Cubano.
cubana que trabajaba para la OPS en Brasil.
working for Bajo?
Yes, the answer is yes, yes, yes. I mean, that's what she told me, that's what's in the lawsuit, that's what the other doctors, by the way, the other two plaintiffs are Fidel Cruz and Marcela Rivero, who are in Houston. There are four named plaintiffs. The way the class action works is that you file a suit on behalf of individuals whose claims are representative of the entire class. And as you heard, their experiences were commonly applied. It's Cuban policy to force people to take these jobs. It's not voluntary. They're all required to sign a form contract that just has two blanks in it that has provisions that they're never able to negotiate. They're not told what they're going to do. They're not told where they're going to go. They're heavily surveilled. They're required to indoctrinate the local populations, politically for pro-Cuban political people in Brazil. I mean, that happened to everybody, and they were all shortchanged on the money. Yes, sir.
The doctors that decided to stay in Brazil after the program was discontinued, are they eligible to join this lawsuit?
We've filed this case on behalf of the 3,500 who are here in the United States. To have a class action in the U.S. court, you have to be able to notify the people who are affected, who are members of the class. At the moment, I don't know if we would have the ability to notify all the people who are still in Brazil, for example. So we're starting with those who are here in the United States. That's a question we would address at a future time.
If any of them, your law firm or something?
That's not the issue. Well, that's not really the issue, because it's got to be on a class-wide basis. So it has to be common to the people who have experienced, the wrongdoing and who are within our reach. If people from Brazil contact us, I think that's something we would have to take up with the court at the appropriate time as to whether that population would be susceptible to being part of the class. I want to address a question that's come up with other media, which is, how can you sue the United Nations? Isn't it immune? Didn't the Haitian victims of the cholera epidemic that was brought there by foreign organizations, didn't they try to sue and didn't they lose because of immunity of the United Nations? And the answer to that question is very simple. What was done in Haiti was a horrific experience and caused massive damage to the Haitian people, and it's a huge tragedy. But it was an accident. It was negligence by the organization that was involved. What PAHO did here was no accident. It was very intentional. The Haitians did not get two countries to come together with a UN organization and enter into elaborate contracts to bring cholera to Haiti. That didn't happen. That is what happened here. PAHO, Cuba, Brazil, a private company in Cuba, all engineered this program, which is a violation of human trafficking laws, international law. They are criminal acts, and we have statutes in this country to allow the plaintiffs to seek a remedy for it. That's the difference. That's why we don't believe that the PAHO would be immune under these circumstances. Well, listen, we want to thank everybody, and especially Dr. Matos, Dr. Caballo, for your courage in speaking out and for moving forward with this very important lawsuit to bring human rights to yourselves and others who you will benefit by your actions. Thank you all very much.